Yo, what's going on? As of the filming of this video, I make about 300 grand a year. I have multiple six figures in liquid net worth, and I've accomplished a relative level of financial freedom. And I've accomplished a lot of the goals that when I initially got into sales, a lot of these things that I've accomplished seemed so far-fetched and almost impossible when I was initially starting out. And in this video, what I want to do is basically take you year by year through the 6 years that I've been working in high ticket sales now, going from doing dials nonstop to working up to managing sales team to ultimately building my educational placement business. I want to take you through every single year in my career and the key lessons that I learned. Specifically what I would tell myself starting out. That way you watching this video can take those lessons and hopefully see these types of results way sooner into your own career, okay? So let's jump in. First off, when I first got into sales, so before I even got into sales, I was 18 years old. I was in a accounting and finance degree. I was in my first year of university. I always knew my entire life I did not want to go down the 9-to-5 path. I saw my parents do that. Every once in a while I would go into their work. I would see their lifestyle. It looked depressing as hell to me. And my entire life, I just knew that that was not where I was going to end up. But I was getting a degree and I was getting an education that would lead me into that life. So I remember the year before I went into university, I had literally spent the entire summer working. I was a lifeguard, guarding like condo pools where I would literally just sit at the pool for like 10 hours a day. Like one person would swim and I would just be like on my laptop researching. I wasn't even watching the pool, right? And out of all the money that I saved up that summer, I'd spent about $5K on a software. It was a sneaker bot, which would allow me to basically buy like hyped sneakers and Yeezys and Jordans and things like that. It would allow me to buy them at retail. That way I could resell them. That was kind of my first business that, I really put a lot of effort into. And, that was something that I grinded. I spent so much time on, I spent a lot of money on. And when I ended up going to school the fall, just after that summer, I would be waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. multiple times a week. I would be doing all this crazy setup, learning all this insane like coding and proxies and IP addresses and like all this complex shit. And, at the end of the day, like it amounted to, I was probably making like a couple $100s a month from the profit that I was making. Like it was extremely difficult. And, the core lesson that I learned, I also gave drop shipping an attempt. That I didn't put in as much time as I did the sneaker reselling. But, it was essentially the same lesson where what I realized was that a lot of these online businesses or opportunities that you see online, you see a lot of people who kind of promote the end result of it. But what you don't realize is that specifically with online businesses, there's two major downsides to it when you're starting out with no experience, right? Number one is it takes a lot of capital to compete with other guys who are already in the industry and who are already doing well. And it also takes multiple skill sets, right? Skill sets where you're starting at zero across all of them. And you have to fund your business as you're learning these skill sets, meaning you're going to burn through a lot of cash before you really start hitting it big, right? And that's something that I just underestimated. When I first heard about high ticket sales, right? This was in like late 2019. I had a friend of mine that I actually used to do door-to-door sales with in high school. I was doing window cleaning for a little bit like part-time with him. I'd heard that he was doing this where, he was essentially partnering up with influencers online who had these high ticket programs. He was selling a 3 to 5K offer for an e-commerce coaching business. And he was earning a 10% commission on each sale, right? And when I understood that, right? When I understood that, hey, I can make a $300 commission on a 30-minute sales call, and I can talk to as many people as I want throughout the day. And I'm comparing that to, my 6 months of grind and effort and all this money that I poured into my previous business, which amounted to basically nothing. I was all over it. And the thing is sales and communication and talking to people in confidence, at that time of my life was not a strong suit of mine. But, I always understood that I had big goals. There was big things that I wanted to accomplish. I didn't want to wait till I was fucking 30 years old, 35 years old to be able to clear 100 grand a year. I wanted to do it now. And, at that point in my life, especially learning about high ticket sales, I'd finally found someone who was my age that I related to that was actually accomplishing a lot of the things that I wanted to do. And the first lesson really that I understood was that, all of my goals and the things that I wanted to make, the money that I wanted to make, the freedom that I wanted to have, the things I wanted to do, those were on the other side of skill sets that I didn't have, right? And if I locked in, if I went all in on mastering those skill sets, I could compress the amount of time that it would take me to actually accomplish a lot of those goals, right? And when that clicked in my head, I basically went all in on sales specifically, because I understood that sales, especially, at the time, I wasn't at all like super confident with it. Even with like the door-to-door stuff and the things that I was doing in high school, I was never good at it. I was actually like, I would knock on doors and like hope every single time I would knock on a door, I'd get so much anxiety, and I would hope that they wouldn't open the door, and I just understood that sales is a baseline skill set. I didn't know how it would play out for me. I didn't know where it would actually take me, but I just understood that if I mastered the skill of sales, then it is impossible that I'm not making multiple six figures in my early 20s, right? I just understood this concept, and that's why I went all in as fast as I did, right? So, fast forward a little bit, I started doing sales part-time while I was in school. Like basically any free hour that I had in between classes or studying or whatever, I was on the phones talking to prospects, closing deals. Between the first few months of 2020, right before COVID hit, I probably got up to making like a few grand a month in commissions. And then COVID happened. They shut down the school. They sent everybody home. Sales are picking up, right? At this time, our industry, you could book calendars. Like the cost to book a call onto a calendar was so insanely cheap. All of these high ticket offers were scaling like crazy. And in I want to say like the 6 to 8 months after, March of 2020, that e-com offer that I had first started on, we ended up scaling that to anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million a month. It was insane, especially given the fact that, at the time I had just wrapped up my exams. I made a decision to drop out of school at that point. I was working between 8 to 12 hours a day, for the most part, 7 days a week. And I kept that up for a pretty long time, right? And that's really lesson number 2, right? I think, for me, I remember when I first started in sales, there's so much more training and resources and material and like content like this that you can find on the internet. There was very little of this. There was almost nothing like this on the internet at the time. I remember like seeing a lot of the people that were doing high ticket sales with me, like a lot of my friends and people that I grew up with who had, also heard about this thing, and they also started doing it with me. Some of them were just like more naturally inclined to it, like some of them were just more confident. They were better communicators, and they were just better on the phones. Right. And I remember I would tell myself, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm not as good as maybe some of these other people. I'm just going to make up for it with my work ethic, right? And that's why I worked the amount of hours and the amount of days that I did, is that I understood that, hey, if I'm just at the office sooner and I leave later, if I'm just taking calls on Sundays when everybody else isn't, if I'm just doing more than everybody else, I'm going to outperform everybody else. And because I was able to maintain that and stay consistent with that, which isn't easy, but because I was able to do that, it's like a lot of the people who were significantly further ahead than me, that was closing alongside me starting out, I was able to surpass them in an amount of time, right? So it's like if you're starting out in sales, and maybe you're probably like me, where like you're not super naturally inclined towards sales, you're not great at it. It's like, understand, you can just make a decision to outwork everybody else, and over time, it's impossible that you don't beat out everybody else. Okay. Now let's move on. So after that point, when we scaled up that first account, what ended up happening is we transitioned our model, like all the guys that I was working with, we transitioned to just selling for this one client and this one account. We started taking on multiple sales teams, right? So this is when we transitioned into a sales agency model where we would partner up with big coaches and influencers that were scaling up their info products, and we would just manage their sales teams for them, right? My first 12 months in sales, I was able to clear about 90 grand in commissions, and that was just off of pure work ethic. Now, something that started happening, and especially if you're already in high ticket sales, you're just kind of starting out in the space, something that you want to understand is there are always going to be there's going to be highs and lows. There's going to be peaks and valleys, right? Both in your performance, but then also in your offer's performance, right? Like there's never going to be a time where it's just steady, consistent growth and everything is just going smoothly, right? Like you're going to have, and like we did, right? Like we had a very long stretch of time where, things were very hot, we had tons of leads every single day. People were warm. The market was hot. and we're crushing it, right? And then there's maybe a 2 to 3 month period where ads shut down, things don't perform as well as they do. You have to rework the offer a little bit. You have to pause things for a couple of months before you can really ramp back up, right? So there's fluctuations in how much leads you get and the quality of those leads, right? And something that I would do that I see a lot of people doing who step into sales is they'll get into the habit of like blaming the leads, right? Or blaming the fact that things are slow right now. I'm getting less calls. People are coming in. They're not as hot. They're not as ready to buy, right? And a lot of people are under the misconception that like you're going to get into high ticket sales and you're just going to be a cashier all the time, right? Because they'll taste it. They'll taste that for a little bit where people are just booking on your calendar, credit card in hand, ready to buy something. And then all of a sudden when things slow down a little bit, then they just go to, oh, it's just the leads, it's just the marketing, whatever, right? Now, here's the thing is that mindset, like you might be objectively correct that, those things are working against you and those things are affecting your performance. But the next core lesson that I learned is that if you put any energy to that thought, you're instantly basically releasing all control over your results and saying that, hey, I have no control over whether I succeed or fail. It all just comes down to the marketing, right? Which basically means you have no control over your income, right? So taking accountability and taking extreme ownership where regardless of what's happening, the only person you blame is yourself, right? It's easier said than done, right? But this was one of the key lessons that I learned probably in my second year of sales, especially when things did start fluctuating a little bit. And what I started doing, right, was focusing on what I could control, right, is specifically follow-ups, upsells, and other sales activities, okay? This was major. So again, I'm still at this point in my career, maybe 2 years in, I'm solid, I'm good at what I'm doing, but I'm definitely not great. And I'm definitely not the most skilled salesperson on my team. However, I'm consistently, like over the course of that year, I'm consistently in the top 3 on a sales team of probably about 10 to 15 people, right? And the reason why, and a major reason why I was able to do that was, number one, the first point that I mentioned is that I would just outwork people. I would just work on days and times that other people just weren't willing to work. And number 2 was because of the sales activities, follow-ups, and upsells. I basically reached a point where any lead that didn't close immediately, where other people would kind of just write them off and forget about them, I would get really organized with my CRM, my Google Sheets, my notes. Every person who was warm but they didn't have the money, I would keep logs of, and I would keep track of, and I would be texting them on a weekly basis, sometimes for 1, 2, 3 months. And what happened was me just being on top of follow-ups, upsells, sales activities, me being very organized with all my opportunities, it had reached a point where on basically any given month, I would be collecting like 20 to 30 grand a month in sales just off of opportunities that I would create on my own. That marketing wouldn't necessarily generate for me, but I would just create by keeping in touch with people and by being active, right? Which equates to like 2 to 3 grand a month in commissions coming in at all times, right? So that's, what are we at? I don't know, lesson number 3 maybe is, take extreme accountability and ownership over your results. And then when you do that, you start to get creative with different things that you can do within your sales process to create new opportunities for yourself, right? Accountability. And just like as a side note, that's like the number 1 character trait that I've seen over the course of my entire 6-year career. Training and working alongside literally hundreds of other sales reps, remote and in office, within my training company and also within the agency. Like the number 1 character trait for success is when there's a problem, when you're not performing at the level that you want to, what do you blame? Do you blame external circumstances or internal circumstances? Right? One of those is comfortable, one of those is uncomfortable, but one of those is going to allow you to grow and take control over your outcomes, and the other one isn't, right? Very important character trait. Not easy to develop, but that was something that I took very seriously, and that was one of the reasons why I was able to be a top producer without necessarily being the best closer on my team, okay? Now, the next phase, when I was about, probably about 3 years in, right? When I'm about 21, 22, this is when our agency really started to grow a lot. At the time, we were one of the only sales agencies that was really doing it like this. We had massive results for the clients that we were working with, and we started to work with some bigger names, right? One of those names being Tai Lopez. At this point, Tai Lopez was literally one of the biggest online coaches and influencers in social media at the time. And he was relaunching his personal brand, right? He had went on a big run in like 2018, something like that, when he was doing SMMA, and he had just relaunched his personal brand. He was selling coaching for, e-com, SMMA, things like that, like, $3,000 to $8,000 products. But he was also selling masterminds and like high level one-on-one consulting with price points between like 25, 50K up to 100 grand, right? Now, I remember I got a text on a Sunday, and I find out that, okay, tomorrow you're going to be kicking off Tai Lopez. There's 8 leads booked on your calendar. All of them are multi-millionaire business owners, and we're launching this 25K mastermind package, and you're going to be taking the calls. Up until this point, I'm selling BizUp, B2C, like 3 to 5K e-commerce coaching to people who want to create more freedom in their lives and 9-to-5ers, things like that, right? So this was a massive jump in terms of what I was previously used to, okay? And one of the biggest things, number one is I lack the skill set to, have a more sophisticated conversation and close a more sophisticated kind of prospect. And I also lack the confidence, right? Like, you need to, in sales, you need to have an extreme level of self-esteem, right? You need to have a very high sense of self, especially like I'm over here at 21 years old. Like, I had touched my first few months of 10 grand a month, and I'm on the phone talking to multi-millionaires trying to close them on 25, 50, 100K packages, right? So there's a certain level of confidence and conviction that you need to have to control and keep an authority on a sales call with that kind of prospect, right? At this point in my career, I made a decision like, okay, like I'm not satisfied with staying at 10 grand a month. Like, I want to level up all the way. I had seen what was possible, and I wanted to take things to the next level. And one of the things, I always, again, focusing like back on that point of accountability, I would always think, what is in my control, right? I understood that, okay, like if I had, for like kicking off an offer like Tai, for example, right? If I have a bad day or a bad week, like everybody's coming to me saying like, yo, what's going on with the leads? Like, why aren't deals going up? Like, what the fuck is happening, right? There's a lot of pressure on you to perform, right? And rather than, get in my head and think like, fuck, I'm not performing, I'm not closing enough, I need to do more and stressing myself out, I would focus on what I could improve, right? So this was when I really focused on 2 things, okay? Number one was my sales skill set. This is when I really doubled down on that, and I created a process for how I could improve on a day-by-day basis. And this is also when I really dialed in my personal development, right? So I'll start with the skill set. The thing is when you go through a sales day and when you're talking to all these prospects and, it's super busy, super hectic, you're having all these calls, like what happens is at the end of your day, let's say you didn't perform the way you wanted to, right? When you look back at your day, it was all kind of just this big blur, and then you're tired at the end of the day, you're exhausted, you just want to chill out, recoup, and get ready for tomorrow, right? And the last thing you're going to do is like go back and listen to call recordings and reflect and analyze, right? So what I started doing was I started keeping track of every single conversation that I would have, and I would keep notes on it throughout the day, every single day. What I would be looking for specifically were my missed opportunities, right? So for example, if I have 8 calls on a day, 6 of them show up, for example. Let's say out of those 6, 3 of them are actually qualified for my high ticket offer. 1 of them I close, and then the 2 I don't, right? All I'm going to care about out of those 8 calls, and maybe I did a bunch of extra outreach and dials and things like that, all of my attention is going to go on those 2 missed opportunities that I had for the day. I'm going to look at what was the objection that they gave me and what was the source of that objection, right? So like, for example, if I was getting a lot of like, yeah, I don't know, I just want to like think about it for a little bit and then I'll get back to you, right? Okay, what's the source of that objection? Is it belief that they don't have full certainty and belief that by buying my thing, they're going to get to where they want to be? Is it that they don't have urgency, that they don't have a fire under their ass to move on it now? Or is it that they don't trust me? They don't trust that, it actually is what I say it is, right? It's usually one of those 3 things. I would look at the objection, and then I would look at the root of that objection. And then what I would do on a daily basis, I would highlight those missed opportunities, and then I would turn that into an actionable going into the next day, right? So for example, okay, if people don't have a high enough level of belief to actually, piff on a $25,000 deal, or take massive action on it, right? What can I do? I can implement a story of a similar business owner, just like them, that accomplished the result that they want, right? Cool, that's my actionable for the next day. So by doing this, I kind of removed like that stress and pressure on myself because I knew that I was making incremental improvements on a day-to-day basis. I wasn't just showing up the next day and like trying harder, because this is what I would do a lot of the times. It's like I would just have a bad day and I would, okay, hopefully tomorrow's better. Hopefully the leads are better, right? No, I would come into the next day and I would make a very intentional adjustment onto my sales calls, which if I did that, I would be more likely to close the yesterday's missed opportunity, right? I have full videos going over that one concept. That alone allowed me to probably double my commissions in a span of 3 or 4 months when I started really taking that seriously by identifying my missed opportunities and turning those into actionables into the next day to like methodically improve my skill set on a day-by-day basis. Okay, that was one. Number two was personal development, right? I felt that if I'm gonna hop on a call with these multimillionaire business owners, right, I need to be on that call and I need to be speaking with complete conviction, complete confidence. There can't be any lapse in what I'm actually saying, right? Otherwise, they're not gonna respect me and they're not gonna buy from me. They're gonna give me some BS at the end of the call, you know? And like, up until this point, right, again, I'm working like crazy hours. I'm staying up late. I'm smoking weed every once in a while. I'm watching YouTube. I'm playing video games. You know, I'm doing shit that I know isn't productive, but I'm just doing it just to do it, right? And because of that, it's like I realized I would, for the first 3 or 4 calls of my day, like I just wouldn't be sharp, you know? I would be like kind of half asleep. I'd be like drinking energy drinks and nicotine and all of that just to try to like get myself going. And then really only in the afternoon, I would be at 100%, you know? And because of, you know, my bad habits and the things outside of sales that I didn't dial in, it was affecting what was happening in my sales day, right? So what I started doing was, you know, I got really big on like day-to-day commitments, right? What am I gonna do every single day that's going to, you know, basically guarantee that I'm at my peak performance, I'm at peak confidence, peak energy, peak conviction, so that I can perform at the highest level, right? I really started treating this as if I was an athlete. So that came down to every single day, like I would be up at 6 a.m. In order for me to be up at 6 a.m., I would have to be in bed by 10 p.m. You know, I would be getting a workout in by 7 a.m. I realized that when I got a workout in the morning, I would, you know, come out of that workout, I would be sharp, you know, like my testosterone, everything is good. I feel pumped up. I feel high energy. I feel confident, where my first call of the day, I'm at my peak performance, you know. What else? I made a very intentional adjustment to, especially like if you want to sell more expensive stuff, you do have to have a higher level of intelligence, right? Like if you want to close more intelligent people and people who are further who are maybe further ahead than you, like you have to be smart, you have to be intelligent, you have to know things about business, about life, etc., right? And something else that I did was I made a conscious decision to switch out entertainment for education, right? So I cut off all the bullshit, the Netflix, the YouTube, the crap, and I would turn that into podcasts, reading books, reading biographies, right? Even like, you know, every few months I would go out to like networking events or like these like big speaking events and things like that, right? Just to get in those rooms. And I really just like cut off all the bullshit entertainment stuff to make the learning fun, right? You can 100% do that, right? That's something that like I used to be really lazy about. But when I just made that adjustment, all of a sudden now every single day I'm learning something new. And here's another part of that lesson, kind of a lesson within the lesson, is that in sales, right, you cannot pour into others with an empty cup, right? In fact, your cup needs to be overflowing. You need to constantly be taking in new information, new insights, new strategies, new approaches. Like you need to be in a state of learning and consuming new information, which is going to allow you to now pour into other people, right? If you're not constantly doing that, if you're not constantly in a state of learning, then you're going to be dry on your sales calls. You're not going to have the conviction and the confidence that you need to get your point or your idea across, right? So that was another big component of that phase. Now, after that, right, I was probably closing full-time only sales for about 3 years. At that point, we had really scaled out our agency. We were probably at like anywhere between like 5, 8, maybe 10 active clients at any given moment. So at this point, I started managing sales teams, right? So this meant doing the hiring rounds for reps, right? Interviewing them, selling them on the opportunity and why they should even work with us, training them up and getting them up to speed, learning the sales operations side of the business, learning like the day-to-day tasks, meetings, holding reps accountable to certain KPIs and numbers, things like that, communicating with the marketing team in terms of what we're hearing on the phones and how we can use that information to, improve our marketing. And this allowed me to create more leverage for myself, right? This is when I began the concept of, skill stacking, right? So the lesson in this phase, because a lot of people talk about that now, how, they want to get into sales and ultimately progress to like managing sales teams or running a sales agency one day, right? Something to understand is that like leadership and managing sales is an entirely different skill set than sales itself, right? The best salespeople don't necessarily make the best sales managers or sales leaders, right? It's a completely different skill set, and just expecting that opportunity to be handed to you is naive, right? This was something that I understood that I wanted to be a leader. Probably like a year or two before I really like got the official position and I started getting paid for managing sales teams. And because of that, like even when I was closing previously, before I was officially managing sales teams, I was doing a lot of additional work that I wasn't being paid for, right? This is what a lot of people don't understand, but a lot of people want, okay, when I get an opportunity, when I get paid for it, that's when I'm going to start following through. Why would I do extra work and do extra things that I'm not being paid for before I actually got the opportunity, right? A lot of people have that mindset. I was the opposite, where I was like, cool, that's an opportunity that I'd like to do one day. First, let me develop the skills and let me basically be like undeniable that I deserve that kind of opportunity, right? So new reps would come in, I would be role playing them, working with them. I would be running morning meetings. I would do like a little bit of, interviewing and hiring and things like that. I would just generally see myself as a leader within the sales team, and I would do things that a leader would do so that I could start building up the skill sets and get the opportunity that I wanted, right? And get that jump. Because, at the time, I'm probably doing like 8 to 15 grand a month in commissions. You add 4%, which is what I was getting. You add a 4% management fee, when you're managing an offer that's doing 200, 250, 300 grand a month, all of a sudden you're making really good money, right? And that was an opportunity that I wanted. First, I started developing the skill sets. First, I started acting and stepping up, and then I actually got that opportunity, right? Meanwhile, a lot of people, I remember in my agency, a lot of people felt entitled to those kinds of opportunities, but they weren't willing to do those things up front, right? Now, the last phase here, right, that I wanted to talk about, when I was about 23, at this point, we had scaled up this massive agency. We probably had about, 10, 15 reps in office, and then an additional 20 to 30, 40 reps that were remote all around the world, right? We're scaling accounts for some of the largest coaches in the world. We have everything dialed in, systemized, leadership structures, all these different things. And this was probably about, like 2-ish years ago, was when high ticket sales really started to get big. You started seeing, more like YouTube stuff and more Instagram stuff. And really specifically, not even just the content that was being made about it, but the industry itself was growing insanely fast, right? Especially after COVID, right? COVID was kind of the tipping point where like a lot of people kind of realized that like the traditional system and the traditional 9 to 5 and degrees and things like that, it's not what it was 50 years ago, right? Like, and especially with inflation, the cost of living, all these different things, like in order to get ahead and stay ahead and actually like not just survive but thrive, like you have to learn high level skill sets and you have to become extremely valuable. And the traditional education system just wasn't filling that market, right? The high ticket coaching industry absolutely was. So our space is blowing up. At this point, call it like 2023, 24, there is a massive demand for good salespeople, right? All of these massive coaching businesses are being created, but the number one biggest bottleneck that these coaching businesses have is their sales team, right? And how many good salespeople can they actually get to, open up calendar space to bring in more leads, right? a business, they might want to scale, they might want to spend more money on ads, but they physically can't because they can't bring on extra salespeople to take on the extra leads, right? Now, at the same time, there's this massive growing market of people who want to get these jobs, right? Who want to be able to make 6 figures, have control over their schedule, their location, things like that, selling for these companies. But the problem was that the high ticket sales industry, and specifically the high ticket sales conversation, is just so different from any other type of sale, right? When you compare it to like insurance sales or car sales or B2B corporate sales, things like that, it's black and white, right? So you have all these people who are trying to get into the space, but they don't have the skills needed to actually get on a good offer, like a scaling, growing offer where they would actually have high earning potential. Because they just wouldn't perform right off the bat. These good business owners, they would want people to come in who already knew what they were doing. So at the time, we saw a lot of people who were putting up a front. They were doing a lot of flexing, things like that on the internet. But there was very few people that were actually talking about the real sauce and giving real quality training in terms of preparing people for these types of roles. So that's when we started our sales education and placement company. This I was actually a profit share partner on, right? So this is when I went from sales, I went to managing, and then I actually took in a profit share. I took a piece of that business, which I helped grow, right? So what I was doing is I was doing the sales for that. I was running the sales calls. I was doing the fulfillment, where I was doing a lot of daily training, things like that for guys that would come in. And then I also started doing the lead generation for that, right? So fundamental lesson here, right? And this was a big one, is that mastered sales, or not mastered sales, but got really good at sales, got really good at leadership. And then I combined that with started to make content. Instantly, when I started making YouTube videos like this, I was able to track in my first year running YouTube videos, starting out from zero. The first video I ever posted was a case study on a client that we had worked with that we helped get from 0 to 20 grand a month within 3 months of beginning training. That video, you can go find it. I think it has like 40, 50,000 views. My first video I ever posted. In my first 12 months posting YouTube videos, I was able to sign over 100 high ticket clients strictly from YouTube, right? And the reason why that was so successful so quickly was because I had spent years prior mastering all the skills, where I just add on one other skill set of learning how to make YouTube videos, for example. I combine that with my sales skill, my ability to train sales reps, and then I just learned how to put that on camera and package that into a YouTube content. All of a sudden, my income blows up, right? And through doing that, right, stacking skills, you'll be able to see the same thing, where it's like when I was working 8 to 12 hours a day, for example, grinding sales, I thought at the time that I was putting in all those hours so that I can push like the 10 or 15 grand a month, right? When in reality, looking back, because I put in all of that grind, now, for example, when we launch our sales training offer, instantly, that was almost an instant success, right? So through, in the start, it's always the hardest and you work the most and you make the least really in your career. Things just really get easier over time, right? And that's because of leverage, right? And leverage created through skill sets that you learn over time with focus and intention, right? The last lesson that I'll give you, that was the first lesson from that phase. Excuse me, I just had a monster before this. The other lesson, right, especially for the entrepreneurs, I think the reason why something like high ticket sales is so attractive is because you get the income upside, you get the freedom, you get the control over your schedule the same way that you would as a business owner, except the difference is you get none of the downside, right, which is a very important point, right? In any other business, in order to get the financial freedom, the time freedom, the location freedom, that comes with taking an insane amount of risk, taking on an insane amount of stress, having multiple people looking at you, depending on you, all the pressure being on you, and then you get the reward, right? In something like high ticket sales, you get all of those things without the downside, without putting up all the money, without taking all the risk. Somebody else does that for you, right? And specifically what I was doing here was because I was a profit share partner, right? It was the same concept, right? Just on a higher level where I was getting a bigger piece. One of the main lessons here that I learned through this phase was navigating the tough conversations and the negotiations behind that profit share agreement, and the different tiers that we had to that, just navigating my compensation in general, right? where I saw something that, Hormozi was talking about, which you're paid in proportion to, number one, the value that you bring, and number two, your ability to negotiate your value, right? And that was something that I kind of discounted at the start, but over time, I really focused on, and I made that a skill set that I wanted to get good with, right? And the lesson there is that when you create, undeniable value to your business that you're working with, right? When you've developed your skill sets to such a level where you are like objectively irreplaceable, right? Now you have the ability, now you have negotiating leverage where you can come in and ask for more, right? And you can do that in a way where your leader or the business owner or whatever, they're going to happily pay you more because of the value that you're actually bringing, right? Now, again, there's a lot of people who will feel entitled to asking for more, right? They want to ask for more before they bring the value, right? I always looked at it the opposite way. And I think that's why I was able to be successful, not just as a closer, not just as a manager, but also coming in as a partner within a business, right? So I hope this was valuable. I just kind of documented the last 5 or 6 years or so and some of the key lessons that I actually learned into kind of bite-sized information. If you're just starting out in sales, especially now, you can accomplish a lot of what I accomplished, honestly, significantly faster than I did. And it's crazy because even in my sales training and placement program, a lot of the guys that I work with do. Like last year, for example, we probably had, I want to say like 15 to 20 people who all came in between the ages of like 19 to 23. A couple other guys that were older as well, but for the most part, that young demographic of people who were like exactly where I was when I first started, who within their first year, a lot of them were able to get up to like the 15, 20. We had 2 or 3 people who got up to like the 30, 40 grand a month mark within their first 12 months in the space, starting from zero prior experience, working bullshit, dead-end jobs previously. A full year of grinding, they're able to level up through the ranks of like setter, closer, managing sales teams. Some of these guys have gone on to go and build their own business. And the reason why is just because, again, it goes back to what I mentioned a second ago. There's a massive demand for great salespeople and people who are genuinely dedicated to mastering the skill set and the craft, right? Like when you're in an industry that's just growing exponentially, and you just make a commitment to outworking and out-improving everybody else, it's very easy to get ahead of everybody else. And over the years of me being in the space, it just, I realized how much more and more opportunity there is for someone like that to come in and dominate, right? And we see it every single day. So hopefully if you're watching this video, this inspires you to go a little bit harder, to, zoom out a little bit and think on longer timelines as well. People overestimate what they can accomplish in maybe 1 or 2 months, and they severely underestimate what they can accomplish in just a few years. And if you can zoom out, think a little bit bigger, and think in terms of not necessarily immediate results, but you can think in terms of, skill sets that you would need to have that would make it almost impossible that you don't get the results that you want, and you just focus on those skill sets, you'll find that, you basically make accomplishing a lot of your goals a certainty. And that's always the way that I've looked at it. So I hope you got value from this. If you did, drop a like, drop a comment. We have tons of other content that goes deeper into some of these concepts and much more. Check that all out, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.